Hi everyone, this is Bryan Glover and I'm going to show my presentation about Black Rock Commercial Orchard and the conservation efforts of the trees left behind. I originally gave this presentation at the Snohomish County Fruit Society meeting in May 2023 in Snohomish, Washington. About me, that's me on the left as a little kid. With my dog above Lake Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And then also me on the right with my parents in our orchard. And I originally grew up in Kent, Washington. I am an engineer by trade. And just to let everyone know, I don't have any formal horticulture or farming background, but it's a very big hobby of mine. To show you where Black Rock Commercial Orchard was and the remnants are is in Black Rock Bay in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And this map here has the general area of where it's circled with that little marker there. My family has been on Coeur d'Alene Lake since 1915. Those are my great-great-grandparents on the left photo there. And then the actual property that was purchased that included the orchard was in 1941 by my great-grandfather. And that's picture on the right is just a picture of one of the apple trees in bloom overlooking the lake. Now, this slide, I'm going to go through and show you some aerial photos of the general area of the orchard in the red rectangle there on the right-hand side, and show you by each year what it looks like. So in 2019, most of the orchard is very overgrown with various bushes, trees, grasses, lots of pine trees that have just grown to tower over the orchard area. And then interspersed in the orchard, you'll find apple trees. And lots of apple trees, hundreds of apple trees. So as we start going back in time, so this is 2017, still pretty covered with pine trees and other trees. We'll go back 2015, 2013, 2011, and you can start to see that some of the area is clearing up. The pine trees a little bit shorter and not quite as thick of brush. A little better, 2009, 2004, even better. And then 1998, you can see the section in the left corner of the red rectangle has pretty cleared up, and you'll see here even more as we go back. So here's 1981. This is the point where you can start seeing where sort of the layout of the orchard was. The little tiny trees in rows are all the apple trees. Here's 1978, black and white, but you can still see all of the apple trees interspersed with the rest of the pine trees. And then we go back to 1954, which shows a pretty good shot of where the remnants of the orchard was. The orchard itself was mostly in production as a working commercial orchard from 1895 to 1915. So even this photo of 1954 was a good 40 years after most of the sort of the peak of the orchard. But the orchard this rectangle is about 40 acres. The orchard was on about 30 to 40 acres. These are some pictures of what some of the apple trees look like currently in the woods. You can see that they're very overgrown. The tree on the left's probably 30 to 40 feet tall. The tree on the right a little bit shorter, but overall you can see there's just lots of pine trees, lots of brush. And what we've done is we've done a lot of restoration work to first clear a lot of the brush and trees around each of the apple trees. We've gone and pruned a lot of the apple trees and tried to restore some of the fruiting wood, remove dead wood, things like that, and go in and pick the apples and enjoy it. So here's another picture of a very old apple tree, very large. The diameter of that apple tree is about 2.5 feet wide. It's a pretty very old apple. It's got to be one of the original apple trees planted on the property. Here's another shot of what we've done to, basically clear out a bunch of these apple trees. And you can see that they've sort of had a haircut, about 6 to 8 feet above the ground there. And a lot of that has to do with nature pruning with deer and moose and other things to basically prune these trees. All right, so some of the trees that we've known and varieties of apples and other fruits that we've seen growing up here. So apples, we've known of Duchess of Oldenburg, Wealthy, Whitney Crab, Wolf River apples, and yellow transparents. I picked a lot of these growing up during the summer and fall. And then we've noticed lots of different types of crab apples. There are plums, cherry plums, pears, all European pears, and then cherries, sweet and pie cherries, with one of those sweet cherries being a Queen Anne or Napoleon cherry. And most of these were just by word of mouth, with no, I wouldn't say anything was 100% confirmed, but people who'd lived here a long time talking about the different varieties and matching them up to what's there. So what I've done is I've done a lot of work to do some research on what was Black Rock Commercial Orchard, who owned it, who ran it, some of that history. So, I've gathered old pictures from the North Idaho Museum. I have gotten old newspaper articles from the Library of Congress, chronicling America. I have got some news articles from Google News Archive, and then also newspapers.com by Ancestry. From the North Idaho Museum, I was able to get a lot of photos. These photos here, the photo on the top right is a picture of Black Rock, which is a very prominent rock structure that you can see today. Everyone on the lake pretty much knows if you say Black Rock, they know where that is, sort of halfway down the lake. A long time ago, around a little before 1900, there was actually a steamboat dock, and it was pretty much the easiest way to get from Coeur d'Alene down to Black Rock was by boat. by steamboat. And so you can see there in the bottom right photo, there's a horse and at the dock and some goods that were being shipped. And then around the same time that I mentioned, 1895 to 1915, there was a general store and post office. And there was an original one, and it burned in sort of the early 1900s, and then they rebuilt. So the one on the top left is one of the original general stores and post office. Here's some more photos. The top left one actually mentions Black Rock Commercial Orchard, and you can see the general store there and post office, which was on the beach. The other one that I just showed you was up the hill. And then you can see a farmhouse in the very back of that picture, and that's where the owners of the Black Rock Commercial Orchard lived. It was the Johnson brothers. You had Fred and Edward Johnson. The picture on the top right is a picture of my great-grandparents' cabin that they built in place of that farmhouse in pretty close to the same location, and they actually used some of the pieces of that farmhouse, most notably the windows on the right there, as to build this house. Bottom left, you can see a picture of Black Rock again, and then in the distance is the orchard with, you can see some of the pine trees there. And then the right picture is a picture of that farmhouse from the top left photo. And then it's not very clear, but there is a steamboat on the lake there going up the lake. A couple other old photos I found. These are pictures of the orchard in bloom, and you can see the rows of trees. Pretty awesome to see this. So from some of the newspaper work that I did, I was able to figure out who owned it. And as I mentioned before, this article said Fred Johnson, who was opening up a farm near Black Rock, was in town Tuesday and became a subscriber to the press. He's preparing to put out an extensive orchard. That was from the Coeur d'Alene Press in 1895. The Coeur d'Alene Press is still the major newspaper for Coeur d'Alene, so it's pretty awesome to see, more than 100 years down the road, this article and tying it to our family property. It was also pretty neat to see that he became a subscriber of the newspaper. Some other work, so about Fred Johnson. Who is Fred Johnson? So from census information, I found that Fred Johnson was born in Sweden in 1862, and my parents still own a copy of the original deed to the property, which notes that the property was originally acquired via the Homestead Act of 1862. And it's noticed there, Frederick J. Johnson. Another article said Fred Johnson, who lives on a farm near Rockford Landing, was in town Tuesday. He is an industrious farmer and will soon be very prosperous as a result of his labor. He has set out 700 fruit trees, which are making a strong and healthy growth. He is also experimenting with different varieties of grapes and finds that Concord does well in this locality. That was from the Coeur d'Alene Press in 1897. So, pretty cool to see that he was putting out 700 fruit trees, and that he was also putting out grapes. Another article states that thanks are tendered to Fred Johnson of Len Landing, which Len Landing was another name for this area, for a number of clusters of fine Concord grapes left at his office Tuesday. Mr. Johnson's place, located about 9 miles up the lake, and although he settled there Only a few years ago, he already has one of the finest orchards in this end of the state and a start up for a fine vineyard. He has proved to his entire satisfaction that as large and finely flavored grapes can be raised in the neighborhood as anywhere, and will next season put out several more acres to vineyard. And that was in 1898. So to sort of capture what we know so far, we know that there were 700 fruit trees. They didn't mention what varieties, but we did mention that he grew grapes, and Concord was the main variety that he was growing at the late 1800s. From the USDA pomological archives, you can pull up a bunch of paintings of different fruits that they set out to make for all sorts of fruits in the U.S. And this is a picture of the Concord grape, which is still very common today. Most famous in your Welch's grape juice or Welch's grape jelly. Another great article which talks about the Johnson brothers having a model fruit farm. This one talks about the horticultural inspector talking about how good the fruit trees are going to be this year in 1907. And then the article goes in to talk more about how they grow pears, cherries, plums, and they were going to add 10 more acres to their orchard in an experiment with grapes on a large scale. This article says that they were growing Warden grapes, and they were better adapted to this district than any other variety. And it talks about the Black Rock orchards that are handled in a most scientific manner. They use the latest appliances to take care of the trees, and improved methods of cultivation are used. A number of beehives are kept in the orchard, and the bees help in making the trees bear heavily and also furnish a large quantity of honey. So now, based off of what we have, it mentioned that grapes were grown, including Warden, which Warden is a seedling of Concord that ripens a couple weeks earlier than Concord. And then it also mentioned peaches and plums. This is a picture of the Warden grape, which looks very similar to the Concord. This was probably my favorite newspaper article to gather about the article, because it started to mention varieties of apples that were grown here. So it talks more about the orchard on the farm and how that these fruits, apples, peaches, and pears that were shown or brought to show at the Spokane Exposition, and it mentions Beeheimer apples, which I determined is also named Bietigheimer. There were Wealthy apples, Maiden Blush, Ben Davis, Northern Spy, and Geniton, Crosby peach, Flemish Beauty pears, and all the fruit is nicely colored and of good flavor. And that was from 1900. So to write those down, we have Ben Davis, Bietigheimer, Geniton, which is likely a Rawls Jeanette apple, Maiden Blush, Northern Spy, Wealthy, the Concord and Warden grape, peaches, Crosby, and Flemish Beauty pear. There's a picture of Rawls Jeanette. In the middle is Maiden Blush, which Maiden Blush is most commonly known for, or at least in the past, it was known for drying apples because the apples would not brown once cut. Northern Spy, a very large tart apple that is known for pies. There's the phrase spies for pies. And you can still find those today. The Wealthy Apple is a very famous apple. It was developed by Peter Gideon. This is a book I have called The Great American Apple Wizard, where you can learn about it. Sort of a quick summary of the story is he and his wife, Wealthy, were down to their last bits of money living in Minnesota. He was trying to breed an apple that would survive the harsh winter climate there. And he sent out for some seeds, which he at the time thought were from the cherry crab, and planted them, and the tree survived and became a very good eating apple. From what we know today, the Wealthy Apple from DNA testing is a seedling of the Jonathan apple and Duchess of Oldenburg, which is a famous Russian apple, which is you can find in home orchards today. Here's a picture of the Flemish Beauty pear. And then I started finding some more articles about some of the other fruits grown. This one mentions E.G. Johnson of the Black Rock Commercial Orchard shipped 2 carloads of King's and Jacob's sweets to Minneapolis. And that was in the Spokesman Review in November of 1910. And then it was really cool to see that some of the apples that were grown here were shipped to South Africa. So the article on the right, L.W. Chandler, who ran the post office and the general store, eventually became owner of the Black Rock Commercial Orchard when Fred Johnson decided to, he ran into some money issues and sort of semi-retired. But I'll talk about that a little bit later. But this shows that a carload of Wealthy apples were shipped to South Africa via steamer from Seattle in 1912. So a couple more varieties to add to our list here. We have Jacob's Sweet and King's, or also known as King of Tompkins County. From what I can tell from this list, the only apple that is not readily available is Jacob's Sweet. It's in the process of trying to figure out if the apple is completely lost or if it's rare, but you can't really find it around the country now. So it would be very important to see if there are any old apples on our tree, on our property, that are Jacob's Sweet, because then we could revive a potential lost variety. So here are a couple pictures of, here's a picture of the King of Tompkins County, and then a picture of Jacob's Sweet. Another thing that was pretty awesome that we found was an actual picture of what was on the apple boxes for Black Rock Commercial Orchard. So it has the name, it shows it's from Black Rock, Idaho, has a picture of Black Rock, which I showed you previously, and then sort of showing the orchard in the background. My uncle and my grandmother found this at a museum in Yakima, Washington, by luck, and it's just a pretty awesome find because these things are pretty rare nowadays. So after 1915 or around then, what happened to Black Rock Commercial Orchard? So unfortunately, they ran into a lot of issues. They had some issues with, you know, bad crops from weather, and then they were using an old steamboat to store some of the apples on the use it as a storage facility on the lake right next to the orchard, and the steamer burned to the water's edge, taking a big load of apples with it that could have been sold, and so they ran into money issues that way. And then around the same time, Fred Johnson, he had his own money issues, decided to semi-retire down to Santa Cruz, California. And I found this article that talks about that he had some burns from a kerosene heater, and he unfortunately had some sort of like a weak heart from some issues as a child, and after what was it? I think like 6 weeks, he ended up passing away. So sort of a sad end to the former orchard owner. So with as I sort of mentioned, the Jacob Sweet being a potential lost apple, one of the groups that we've been working with to ensure that some of our apples may be or may not be lost varieties is the Lost Apple Project. The Lost Apple Project is a non-profit organization that searches abandoned farms and orchards in the Pacific Northwest to locate old apple varieties that have thought to be lost or extinct. The project was founded by E.J. Brandt and David Benscotter, who work closely with the Temperate Orchard Conservancy in Oregon, and there they identify specimens that they collect, and both EJ and David rely on old county fair records, newspaper clippings, and nursery sale ledgers, as well as tips from people. Someone may say, I remember, this apple that used to grow in this area. It was my favorite apple. And sometimes they're able to match trees to names that way. They typically collect the fruit in the fall and then return in the winter to gather scions or little cuttings of the branches to graft to basically clone the tree and be able to propagate it that way. The project is affiliated with the Whitman County Historical Society. As of May 2021, the project has discovered 29 lost apple varieties. Some of the lost apple varieties that the project has found in Washington and Idaho include the Streaked Pippin, Sari Sinap, and Nero. Nero, which was discovered at Steptoe Butte, was the first old apple variety found by Dave Benscotter. So, in the fall, at my parents' place here, this is what it typically looks like in the kitchen. A bunch of bags of different apples that we've collected from all the trees on the property. It's a lot of fun, though. These are some pictures of just showing some of the different diversity and colors and sizes and shapes of different apples that we've found over the years, from yellow ones with spots to yellow apples with big red blush to very deep red apples with different russeting and lines on them. The bottom left one showing a very nice red apple with dark crimson stripes. In the bottom middle, sort of a crabapple sized apple, deep red with yellow. And then we even have some apples that show some bleeding flesh or semi-red flesh in the apple. Here's another picture that shows some of the different types of apples that we've found on the property. Some of them named, some of them unnamed. And then in the front there are a couple pears, different varieties. Another fun thing about going out and exploring to find apples, this is Dave Benscotter, and as we look in here and zoom in, you can see over on the right there was a moose, which was a fun experience that we had when he was out one time. Just a big bull moose roaming, eating apples off the ground and off the trees. And didn't really seem to pay attention to us that much. Was just roaming around. All right, so in collaboration with the Lost Apple Project and the Temperate Orchard Conservancy, we've been able to figure out which apples are, right there it shows Ben Davis being one that they helped us identify, the Black Twig apple, and then King of Tompkins County. Yeah, and that's been about it. But this is just another showing all of the ones that we know of, plus the ones that were historically known via the newspaper articles I found. Here's a picture of the King of Tompkins County apple that matches our newspaper finds, and then what the Lost Apple Project and Temperate Orchard Conservancy were able to identify. That's a very good tasting apple. It's also a very common old apple in Western Washington. This is one that is one of our apples, and I believe this to be Bietigheim apple. I still need to do DNA testing on it, but has all the characteristics of that apple. This is the Black Rock Duchess of Oldenburg. Same, it hasn't been tested, but it has all the right characteristics for it. Ripens in early to mid-September. This one is one of the ones we've had DNA tested. It's a very large apple. As you can see, it's almost 5 inches tall, and 4 to 5 inches wide. Very, very large apple. It's a crisp apple, and from DNA testing, it's most likely a seedling. Its parents were Willow Twig and Duchess of Oldenburg, which that DNA testing was courtesy of Cameron Peace at Washington State University, who's doing a lot of the fruit DNA testing nowadays. And this one, because it's, I'm very confident it's a seedling, I've named it Willow King in sort of the paying homage to its parents. This one, it's a red apple with some bleeding flesh. We named all of our trees numbered them around the property. So this one was 20A, and the parents are Haas and Wealthy, which, as we know, Wealthy was prominently grown at the Black Rock Commercial Orchard. And this one is also very, very likely a seedling. So Haas was probably grown here also. Black Rock 17, this one we tested, and it was Wealthy and Ben Davis, both known to be grown here on the orchard. This one, a Black Rock 21, a very neat looking apple. Its parents are Duchess of Oldenburg and Famous. Famous is also known as the snow apple, and originally from Canada. And knowing that Duchess of Oldenburg was grown here, it's very likely that Famous was also grown here on the property. And then I received the DNA testing results for this apple literally a day after I originally gave this presentation in May of 2023, and it was determined that it was Northwest Greening, which was pretty awesome. We knew that there were two trees that had the same variety of apple. I knew that they were a greening. I just didn't know exactly which one it was, and so it was cool to get the DNA testing to confirm that this was Northwest Greening. It's a very good pie apple, and sort of, in some ways similar to a Granny Smith. So going forward, as part of some of the things we've done, we were asked to be interviewed by the Coeur d'Alene Press. So there was a whole article about what we knew about the property and the history of what we'd done. And you can find that online. And then we've been grafting and planting new trees, taking scions of the old apples, and grafting them to known rootstock, and then making new trees or grafting them to established trees. And then we're continuing to do DNA testing to see if there are varieties that may in fact be lost. But I thought this was pretty cool having the Coeur d'Alene Press article, because all my research, or a lot of it, had been done through articles from around 1900 in the Coeur d'Alene Press, and then coming full circle to showing what's been done today. And maybe so many years down the road, someone will be interested in what we've done and look into that from all the articles. I want to say special thanks to David Benscotter, the Lost Apple Project, and the Temperate Orchard Conservatory, Dorothy Dahlgren of the North Idaho Museum, and Cameron Peace of Washington State University. That is my presentation. Hope you enjoyed it, and happy hunting for apples. Thank you.